So this is a crazy thing that has happened, which is that I think people in the media are just far too cavalier throwing out the idea that we're like about to be in civil war.
Yeah.
And that happened recently. So let's put this up there on the screen. Major Garrett, who is actually quite a good reporter. He recently came out with a book called The Big Truth, Upholding Democracy in the Age of the Big Lie, which is about the actual election of 2020, as in how it was administered. His claim is that 2020 is actually the most secure election in modern American history. I don't know anything about the claims of the book, to be clear. What I'm saying, though, is that in his press tour, what he's been like recently saying is that we're, quote, on the brink of civil war. And I mean, that gets bandied about a lot these days. But in particular, what he said was that we are, quote, holy crap, we're 85% there, in an interview with the Daily Beast. And I'm like, hold on a second, dude. Like, you are basically claiming, let's say, okay, let's make it analogous to modern or to American history. When were we 85% of the way to the American Civil War? Like, you're saying it's like what, 1857 in America? No way. That's not even remotely possible. And so I think we should just be very careful, and especially people in the media, to be able to say like, yeah, things are really bad and people are downtrodden and there's like a big class dynamic and all this, but like, we're not taking up arms against each other. And by the way, limited quote unquote conflagrations or riots or anything is not the same thing as opposed to an actual civil war. Like the level of the cavalier nature in which he's just willing to like float these things, and then it just gets picked up by the media and everybody's like loving it. I just think that people should be much more careful when we're discussing, obviously something so sensitive, and just normalizing an idea and almost wishing it to be true. I honestly think that's kind of what part of it is. I'm curious.
I want to get to that in a minute. I want to read his full quote just so we're not accused of like taking him out of context. So he says about the book in this interview with the Daily Beast, we wanted to show people that what we're talking about is just incremental steps from where we already are. I don't think anyone reading the first chapter can honestly say, oh, that could never happen. They have to say, holy crap, we're 85% there. My understanding, I haven't read the book, full disclosure.
I might actually read the book.
The way, it may be
It seems interesting.
He normally, I honestly, I don't follow him that closely, but my impression of him was he was a more sober-minded person.
I worked with him a little bit. I mean, we weren't like colleagues, but like he covered the White House at the same time I covered the White House. He was always one of the straight shooters.
I mean, he's got a phenomenal name.
Yeah.
I just do want to say that. That's a great name.
Great name. He also worked at Fox under Obama. He was the guy who was the White House correspondent under Obama.
Okay, yeah,
and the Obama administration tried to kick him out of the press corps. And the press corps actually stood up for him because they were like, hey, this guy's legit. Like, you can't be doing this. He went up to go work for CBS. He's done Face the Nation. I mean, he's a great interviewer actually in his own right. One of the first people to ever embrace podcasting too in the biz. So like, I do kind of respect him. And that's why I'm looking at this and I'm like, dude, you can't be throwing around words 85% close to civil war without some very serious evidence. And by the way, evidence of wanting to object at the Supreme Court or at the Senate is bad. I think that we've all said that.
Yes.
Evidence of the Overstock CEO and Mike Lindell and Mike Flynn wanting to literally seize the election is also very bad. Is it the same thing, though, as what Michael Moore claimed on our show about Bill Barr going to go seize election boxes in battleground states? No, that's actually not the same thing.
Bill Barr turned out to be one of the reasons.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The reason. But
so it's like what actually happened is like, okay, sorry.
I don't want to downplay the impending risks in terms of possible constitutional crisis. If we wind up with a replay of 2020 where it's close, and there's enough things for Trump to work with to say this is stolen. And honestly, I think he's so brazen now that it doesn't matter whether it's close or not. He'll say it's stolen. Mm-hmm. The fact that you do have so many people who are now, nominees for governor, nominees for Secretary of State, who have said we wouldn't have certified the election, like that is a genuine problem and a potential constitutional crisis. I don't think we should downplay that whatsoever. Freaking Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania is a terrifying disaster. There's no doubt about that. I don't think that we should shrink from saying that. I think part of the obsession with we're on the brink of a civil war, which is a different thing from a constitutional crisis of the type that I'm laying out and contemplating here, and which I think is a very realistic and scary scenario to think about. I think that comes from the fact that it makes these characters like Major Garrett and everybody else in DC, it makes them very central. It makes them like, I'm here at this historic moment in history that's unlike any other. It also, I think, comes out of a bit of a bubble mindset because their whole world, and I understand this, like their whole world is these political conflicts. That's what their whole career and their life, and they live mostly in DC, that's what their whole thing is centered around. So it feels very much like those divisions are the only thing that is really, important in American life right now. Whereas, for the majority of Americans, like they've got a lot of other concerns going on. That's why the threat to democracy never comes up as one of the top issues for voters, because they're like, how about I'm able to pay my rent and put food on the table? And also in day-to-day life, I live out in rural America amongst a lot of people who think a lot differently than me. Not a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters in King George County, Virginia, let me tell you. And life is very, kind, and people are good to each other, and, people try to be respectful, and they try to see things from, it's not, ugly and, we're about to murder each other out there. So I think a part of the Civil War idea and obsession comes from genuine concern over things that are real, and part of it comes from being in a bubble where the only thing you see are these political conflicts, and you think that's all there is.
And vice versa. I live around cringe Ukraine flag libs, and guess what? They're nice people. They're cool. We walk our dogs. I'm like, how's that dog doing? It's like very basic. Can you believe the UPS guy? This guy, the way he puts his packages out there, one guy, one of my neighbors, one of my packages accidentally got delivered, and he was distraught because he had accidentally opened it. I'm like, dude, it's chill. He delivered it to, relax, man. He wrote me a whole note. I'm like, it's totally fine. Once again, he's got some, he's got all the flags outside. It's all good. It's like we're just living. We can point to other American history. I don't think anybody. What's more analogous to our time is the 1876 U.S. election. Everybody forgets about that one. Very close, lots of allegation of fraud, corruption, gets thrown to the House of Representatives. You get a corrupt backroom deal. Rutherford B. Hayes becomes president. I mean, that's probably a hell of a lot more analogous to the quote-unquote constitutional crisis, closeness, fraud allegation. We're getting into the Gilded Age. A lot of backroom, dealing going on, lots of fraught times and all of that. We've gotten through a lot worse.
Yeah.
Not everything is, it's like when, everybody says every online discussion devolves to Hitler. Not everything is a civil war either.
Yeah,
we have
true.
crazy times, acrimonious times in history, and it was fine. We lived through it.
Yeah.
Everyone got over it eventually.
Let me say one more caveat to this, because you pointed this out earlier, but I just want to make this clear.
Yeah.
That's different from saying that we could very much have a continued escalation in political violence, like the maniac who tried to shoot up the FBI office, and the crazy dude who with the pipe bombs and the Trump van and riots. I think it is very possible, if not likely, we continue to have escalations in that direction. That's the fringe of the fringe of the fringe.
Right.
That's not all of society splitting in two as much as, and there are other, there are a lot of right-wing. Remember, after the Trump FBI raid, there were all these, people online who were like, the Civil War starts now. And it's actually, it doesn't. And they just went and did their podcast and have continued, doing their paid speeches like they always do.
100% correct. Same thing. We've had, you think we've never had anarchist violence in this country before? We had a whole string of, crazy bombings in the 70s. Also in the early 1900s.
Or the early 1990s with Timothy McVeigh.
Right, McVeigh, right.
Anti-government extremists.
There's still a lot of questions about that. Anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.